Planet Institute.
Welcome to R&D Unplugged, a podcast from the Learning Planet Institute, dedicated to discussing with researchers on the impact of their work in a simple way. My name is Annalena, and today's guest is Shawn Ginwright. He's a professor of practice at Harvard Graduate School of Education and co-founder and CEO of Flourish Agenda, a research lab dedicated to unlocking the power of healing and empowering youth of color. Welcome, Shawn. We are happy you could join us today.
I'm glad to be here.
Your research is focusing on how trauma and structural inequality affect African American and urban youth while advancing transformative methods that promote healing and empowerment. You are known for developing the healing-centered engagement and asset-based framework that moves beyond trauma-informed care to emphasize resilience, community, identity, agency, and justice. Wow.
That's a lot. That's
a lot.
That's a lot.
And you're doing it.
You got it all.
But before we dive deeper into this, maybe let's start with a less conventional question first. We always ask that to our guests here at the podcast. If your research had a theme song, what would it be and why?
Well, that's a good question. It would be Redemption Song by Bob Marley.
These songs of freedom, 'cause all I ever have, redemption songs.
Nice one.
A song about our history, a song about our future, a song about healing, a song about redemption. So I think my work would best exemplify, or that song would best exemplify my research and my work.
Nice. Thank you for
sharing. And plus, I
sharing.
love Bob Marley's music.
Always
Who doesn't?
good. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's dive deeper into the research part now. Like a first question I would have to use, like what inspired you actually to pursue this particular research topic?
Well, I've always, probably since high school, I've always found a way to work with youth and really want to support young people. And I think it was probably when I was in graduate school at UC Berkeley, where I was working in my own nonprofit in a community that had been experiencing violence. And at the same time, I was in graduate school. What I was learning in graduate school wasn't really relevant to what I was doing and learning in community. And so I've always wanted to use my research to advance what was happening in organizations and communities. Years ago, when I was living in California and San Diego, there was a young man that I was working with that I was going to bring up to the college that I was attending. And I was working at a middle school in San Diego. And this kid was a, troublemaker kid. So I was like, let me bring him up to the university. So maybe he would have an aspiration to come to the university. And when I had set up the tour, I went back to school and didn't see him and asked his friends, I'm like, hey, it's, where's Michael? I hadn't seen you in a long time. Haven't seen Michael in a long time. Have you guys seen him? And then they shared with me, oh, yeah, Michael was shot and killed over the weekend. And so it was that experience combined with my work in communities that's always sort of inspired me to create solutions that restored the well-being of young people in urban communities.
Oh, wow. What a story. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think that's a really strong, really personal inspiration and motivation also behind that. So you already mentioned that you work in these communities and that there are also a lot of challenges, of course. So how does your research contribute now to issues that the world is facing right now?
Well, in the United States, there will be a shooting, unfortunately, probably every 90 days. And unfortunately, those are going to be in schools. Some of those are in schools. And so what my research is trying to do is not just explain why it happens, but to, one, restore the well-being of young people who've experienced it, provide schools with solutions to behavioral and mental health that sometimes are the root cause of violence. We know, for example, that behavioral and mental health, there's a mental health crisis that's happening in the United States right now, not just in low-income communities, but all over the country. And unfortunately, there isn't enough response. There isn't enough bandwidth to respond to the mental health crisis that's occurring. And so my work provides schools with options and opportunities that can support the mental health of larger numbers of students, because it doesn't require only sort of the conventional way of thinking about therapy. It opens it up. And so my work is about training schools and school districts and any institution that wants to support the growth of young people with these tools and methods to address behavioral mental health.
I think at a time, I think it's not just in the US, but worldwide, where youth is struggling so much with mental health issues. It's a great approach. And I like that you directly say also helping schools actually with options, because it's always hard to start. I'm a teacher myself. You have a classroom of 30 kids, and first of all, it's hard to identify, but also what to do then actually if you identify. So what are these programs about? Like, how can you support teachers to really bring this healing into their classroom?
Well, there's always a lot expected of teachers to do more, not just teach, but teachers got to teach. They got to be social workers. They got to be all these other things. So this is not like another new quick fix thing. And so first and foremost, our theory of change is that you can't support the well-being of the students that you have in your classroom if you don't have well-being. If what's happening in your home or your work stresses you out, how do you expect to actually provide that for young people? So we try to provide the support that teachers need. We work with the school, we work with the school districts, we work with school leaders to provide spaces, conversations, opportunities, activities for the teachers to explore and enhance and build upon their own well-being. And then after that, take those practices into the classroom to build it for their kids. And so this is slightly different than, social emotional learning, SEL practices, which are largely focused on sort of the non-cognitive growth that students need to succeed in school. And while that's important, we are not oftentimes thinking about the social emotional growth of teachers or the social emotional growth of the adults. And so it's primarily still a cognitive process, which is important, but it is not the entire equation. And so our healing approach says that, teachers and adults that are in kids' lives need to be well as well. And our practices and the research is about understanding how to do it and understanding what happens when it is done well.
That's impressive. I think it's great that you mentioned that also the teachers themselves actually have to be well and have to also, rest in themselves to bring that into their classroom. And often it's just too much on teachers. You have to do these, do that, like you say. And I really agree with that approach to actually bring to the school. Yeah. I think for the teachers, it's easier to adapt it than also in their daily lives, and not just as an add-on, but actually just as a general practice they're actually using in their classroom. Yeah,
and in the U.S., the context is for teachers to get well-being. In other words, to take a day off, they have to take a sick day, right? They call it sick days.
Oh, wow.
Some school districts may call them wellness days now, but essentially it's like you get well because you're sick, right? It's not an asset-based approach. Like wellness days are usually used to get well. They're not used to maintain and enhance your wellness. And so practices that allow for ongoing teacher well-being, so you don't have to get sick, right? You could just actually focus on building your sense of well-being. And, my vision is just like there is physical education in every school, right? You teach, I don't know about every school in the U.S., but you have to take physical ed. You have to learn about your body, physical body. My vision is that mental health becomes so normalized as our physical health and becomes a part of the daily curriculum in schools.
Yeah, it's as much as a part of our health than our physical health.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Totally agree. You just mentioned a bit already the research and that you take a look on how it's done and how it actually can be integrated. What was maybe a key finding or an insight you can share from your research?
Yeah, so my early research focused on identity, right? So racial identity, gender identity, class identity. And so one of the first things that are oftentimes harmed in schools are young people's identities. And so my research has found that when you focus on the restoration of young people's identities, that translates to other forms of well-being. So they have greater sense of resilience. They're building a sense of community and relationships with other people in their own identity group. They enhance a greater sense of safety. They have a greater sense of esteem. They feel less insecure about their own identities. All of these features of young people's identities also can be used as curriculum so that the curriculum can be tied to enhancing identity, about learning about women's contributions. What does it mean to be a young lady in a particular city? When have you been most proud to be a woman? When have you felt most shamed to be a woman? All of these questions can be integrated in curriculum that ultimately leads to enhancing and strengthening young people's sense of identity.
That's interesting. Was there something that surprised you in it? Like something like, whoa, okay, I did not expect that.
I think the biggest surprise that I have found probably in the last 20 years is that, there's a way that teachers are trained in all these different ways to reach students or to teach students, but that the biggest aha was that teachers aren't developed as humans, right? Right? Teacher development is, I'm going to train you to develop curriculum. I'm going to train you to do classroom management. I'm going to train you how to manage your class. I'm going to train you in discipline. But that the inter experience of teachers, the human part, is not very well known or even cultivated in graduate schools of education or in any teacher training program. So the biggest aha is like, well, we could focus on the curriculum and the working with young people, but what about the teachers? And what needs to be done for those adults that are actually in front of our kids every day?
Yeah, the teachers, they spend most of the time with the kids. Actually, they have them the whole week.
Yeah.
Here in France, it's from the morning till the evening. Actually, that kids actually stay in school, spend the time with their teachers, and then as a parent, you only have the weekend in the end.
Yeah.
And I think we underestimate the influence of teachers on our children. Actually, how they can shape their personalities, their identities, and I think often actually teachers are not prepared for that.
Yeah.
On a human level, if they have the knowledge, they have the methodology, but actually the human level is missing.
Yeah, like your teacher stress, right? I remember one time, Annalena, I was training these teachers, and I was trying to get them to understand about healing young people. It's important to heal young people, and people need to be healed. And this teacher stood up and said, yeah, Dr. Ginwright, I understand young people need to be healed, but what do I do when a student has got a chair and is getting ready to throw it at me because he's angry?
Good question.
I was like, wow, that's a good question. And, when I reflected on that, because what the teacher was saying is, yeah, we could do all this for the students, but what about me? Like, I'm stressed. I'm actually being threatened in the classroom, right? What do I need? So I think the big aha is that we've kind of underestimated what teachers need, spiritually, emotionally, and humanistically, to actually be effective in the classroom.
Yeah, I've been to a conference last week and it was about AI, but there's something a panelist said, like teachers often, they don't have the support to actually implement anything. In this case was AI, but I think it's the same with healing. Where are the materials actually? And also, am I well enough educated to actually implement these things? I have the feeling that also with that, because if I now would think, okay, a school wants to follow that. They're listening to the podcast, they hear about the healing engagement, but I think there are really these things to support teachers with the materials, with a good education or a good practice or a good option, how you described it before, to really support them and give them that support network to really implement these things.
Yep.
It goes a bit with my next question. So you talked already about the support of teachers. How do you make the bridge now between your research and real life?
Great question. Okay, so what do you do? Let's just take, what do you do when your school has just experienced a shooting? What do you do as a teacher when your kids are about to fight? Or what do you do? How do you build a school community that feels safe? How do you build a classroom that feels meaningful? Like, how do you do that, right? So my work is directly connected to the experience of a school day. It's directly connected to how teachers should build their own capacity to have greater impact on their own growth, their own development in the school day. So there's not much distance between the theorizing and the practice, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Maybe let me ask something, since you're so close to the field. Do you have maybe an anecdote or story where your research directly impacted or maybe even changed someone's life?
Yeah, there's a couple examples, and I shared one, that I like to share this story, and I'll make it quick. There's a group of young men I was working with in Oakland around trauma, and they shifted the conversation because I was having them talk about the worst thing that ever happened to them. And guys said, Marcus was like, I don't want to talk about the worst thing that happened to me. I'm much more than my trauma, and started to talk about, his dreams of opening up his own clothing store and all these other things. And the young men shifted the whole conversation to their aspirations and dreams. And there was one young man, his name was John, who wanted to be a firefighter. And he was high in the trauma group, right? Wow. So no one really believed him. But we continued to work at building their aspirations and focusing on their dreams and started to using different kinds of methods rather than just focusing on their trauma. And I had built a relationship with these men. And then about a year or so afterwards, I got a text from John, and he sent me a picture of him in his firefighter outfit, his firefighter uniform. He had become a firefighter. And so I kind of used that to sort of show and to sort of tell folks that by focusing on the assets of young people, we never know what that outcome might be. We never know what kind of healing can take place when we focus on the assets that young people bring and the assets that they have that they want to share. And that actually can become a powerful healing strategy.
That's a beautiful story. Thanks for sharing. Maybe let's stay with the young people and let's pretend I'm 20 years old and I want to change the world for the better. Why should I engage in research, and why should I choose your research topic?
Oh, why should I engage in research, and why should? Well, I'm going to answer your question, but I would ask that 20-year-old. I would ask that 20-year-old, like, what questions do you have about the world? What questions do you have about things that you see? Like, why does this happen and not that? So I would be really curious about that 20-year-old's curiosities. And I would explain that research can help you be more curious and help you answer questions. It can help you build and come up with questions that you don't have. Research helps to demystify the world. It helps to make it not just make sense, but it helps you to have more robust, powerful explanations of things that you may not know. And so that's probably what I would say, but I would ask that 20-year-old a lot of questions. What was the second part of the question?
Why should they choose your research topic?
Why should they choose my research topic? I think I would say that my work is not just research. My work is about improving the human experience. And so anyone, a 20-year-old, a 50-year-old, that wants to understand how to thrive and live a thriving life and show others how to do the same would be what my work is about. The research just happens to explain that process. It helps to codify that, the process for folks. But the core of the work is really, how do I be a better human being? And does that matter in our classrooms with young people?
I think that ends our episode perfectly. Thank you so much. I found our talk really inspiring. It wraps up this episode of the R&D Unplugged podcast. I'm Annalena Neurohr, your host of today. A huge thank you to our guest, Shawn Ginwright, for sharing his valuable insights and expertise with us. And also a big thank you to all our listeners who joined us for today's episode. Thank you so much, Shawn, for coming.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
R&D Unplugged is a Learning Planet Institute podcast. This episode was produced by Annalena Neurohr and Shahab Nastar, with recording by Edouard Picard and editing by Jean-Marc Savin. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. You can find all of them and further information about all our activities and our website at learningplanetinstitute.org/podcasts. So thank you for listening again, and we will catch you next time.
Learning Planet Institute.